Well, hello, everybody. This week, once again, I'm joined with Alistair, and we have a very special guest, Wendy Gardiner. Hello,
Mm.
Wendy, for joining us.
Hello, I'm really pleased to be here.
So, Wendy's history, if anybody doesn't know Wendy Gardiner, amongst the fact that she's a fantastic dressmaker and teacher and organises behind the scenes the majority, if not all, of the workshops for all of the knit and stitching shows, Festival of Quilts. Um, well, you also had some involvement with the Sewing Bee. Was it the first episode with the book, Wendy?
No, so it was the fourth
Sorry,
series. So I
sorry,
was going
I
back a bit
apologise.
now. Yeah, so I wrote the book for the fourth series, and actually, I think it's the last book with the garments and projects in, because ever since then they seem to have just produced a book of techniques, which they've actually taken from the previous books. Because I get a little credit at the back. Don't get a
Right.
copy of the book, but I get a little credit at the back of it.
Oh, that's brilliant. So, is that book still available, Wendy? That's
Mine, well, I
yeah,
think if you can find it, but they haven't republished. So,
right.
once it was gone. I did see it on Amazon for like 84 quid or something. Wished
Wow,
I'd got some stock of it at the time, but I
wow.
haven't.
I hope you still got a copy though.
One copy, yeah.
Bless you. So, what we're going to do this time is have a look at the show that came out this week, and it was all about the theme throughout the whole show was reduce, reuse, and recycle. Now, the first project that they did was the pattern challenge, and very unusually, it was a bag made out of organza using supposedly scraps of fabric. I'll question that straight away because those scraps of fabric were actually fabrics that you can buy in a quilting store now that they then chopped up. I think it would have been better if they'd actually used, vintage or secondhand fabrics. So I'm going to go straight to you, Wendy, to tell me to let us know what you actually thought of that particular project, and then we'll discuss the actual construction of the bag.
Yes. Well, I like the idea. Because I do think it's a really lovely technique to do, and I've seen it done very, very successfully. And I actually quite like it if you do it with free motion as opposed to a very neat grid. Yeah, I like you. I think they obviously were chopping up like fat quarters or something, weren't they? So I don't know they were actually or strips. I don't feel that they were actually remnants, little bits that are left over. But it is great because I keep all my little bits of fabric. If they're sort of more than an A4 size, I keep them, and I never know quite what I'm going to do with them all. So I think it's a really good idea. But, and that's the big but always, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
I think we look at it and we think you could have done this or you could have done that, etc.
Yeah. I think they made it really difficult. Quilting, for anybody who doesn't know, normally quilting is 3 layers, and you normally have your top fabric, a wadding or an interlining in between, and then you have your bottom fabric. So technically they had the 3 layers, but with organza, that was a really difficult fabric for them to work with. One thing that got me, Wendy, was the fact that if it had been me, I would have created a large piece of fabric, spread out all of my confetti pieces, because that's what it's called, confetti quilting, spread those all out. And I certainly would have used an interlining or an interfacing. You could have used something like a solid fleece or a solid fix. And if you were doing this at home, I'd really advise you to do that, because then you can place the fabrics and be a little bit more in control. I was very concerned when they constructed the bag and then were dropping bits in randomly. It just seemed a lot of time. It was just a very weird construction.
It was a weird, absolutely, because like you say, if you could fix them in place, and if you used a solid fix or a solid fleece or something that washes away, you still get that transparency. So you'll still achieve that. But what you would do, as you say, is you would have them in place. And there was the girl with the measuring tape tops, and
Yes.
she was having to turn each piece over, wasn't she, carefully?
Yes.
And then they were trying to poke them into the corners. Well, you wouldn't have that, as you say. If you actually just did all over two big pieces, a big piece, and then cut out the pattern pieces, it would make it much simpler to construct.
And the other thing is, and actually I'm on Create and Craft this weekend, and one of the things I'm going to be demonstrating is it's a bag for a wine. bottle effectively. Now, the way people don't realise is that when you're quilting, and quilting is just your row of stitching, it actually shrinks in your fabric. So to me, again, that when they made those bag pieces, pop the fabrics in and then were asked to quilt, it's going to distort the shapes of that bag, which would not happen if you did it beforehand. Have you got your thoughts on that, Wendy?
Well, no, I absolutely agree, because if you've done it before, what you'll get a quilted piece of fabric, and then you cut out your pattern pieces from that, because obviously they didn't line it either. And the other thing, that they quilted that grid, and they were measuring it carefully. They were using masking tape. There's a thing called a quilter's guide. I think you have one there. Use that.
Yes. So this quilter's guide will either go into the back of your foot, or it'll go into your walking foot. And it means you just have to put one line in, and then you measure from your needle to the edge of this guide. I've got it, so I'll hold it that way. And you basically run this on your previously sewn line. So you do have to mark your first line, sew your first line, and then after that, it's a doddle, because you just use it.
It is. And I'm always amazed at people who don't use it. And you often get that in your basic kit. So if you take a look in your basic kit and see if you've got one of those things. And then when you're sewing, you keep an eye on the guide, not the needle. So you're watching that the guide is in place. A bit like when you're driving a car, you're not looking at the bonnet, you're looking ahead.
That's right. So Alistair, we haven't brought you in on this one, because obviously with it being a bag and we've just gone off here. What was your thoughts of that project?
To be honest, I'm a bit this was not by far my favorite episode of the season so far, and I feel the season so far is a bit bag heavy. I don't really understand why. It seems to be the kind of go-to thing, and as a pattern challenge, I just didn't understand why they were doing a bag. If I would have thought, keep that for the transformation challenge, because I would have thought that would have been ideal for that. But yeah, I just didn't get it, because it's not the way. They have to follow the pattern, and somebody, whoever it was that developed that pattern, was just trying to be too clever for their own good, because it was when they were creating the pocket, and then as you said, they were like trying to fiddly put all their different pieces in. You saw all around the edges, you saw the organza seam. So if you're putting a thin layer in, you would have had to have turned it upside down, and then you'd have had to have gone all the way around the seam edges to try and put fabric to cover the actual seam. So I'm with you guys. I would have created one piece of fabric first, be creative as much as you would have had more control over it, especially if you're doing. So we have a big posh word in the fashion industry called dégradé. The dégradé is essentially a graduation, either monochrome or color wise. Usually it's a block color, so you would go from purple into faint purples, then it would go into lilac, then it would maybe go into cream. So it's a bit like a watercolor bleed is the best way of putting it, but we call that dégradé. So when they're doing about the color change from going from one color to another, I just felt they were just fighting a bit of a losing battle. Also, because it wasn't a lined bag, they were on about that this technique for this bag was so amazing that if you put too much in, it would be you wouldn't be able to sew it. But if you put too little in, the bag would be too floppy. And I'm thinking, well, make a big piece and then sandwich it together, and then you'll have all nice clean seams in. Plus, also there would been raw edges inside the bag. Anyway. So it was just to me, it was very, very confusing for a pattern challenge. I would have thought if they had asked them to make, I don't know, a little jacket, or I don't know, they had to incorporate it into a garment in some sort of way, whether it be a patch pocket or something else. Or I just felt that it didn't really hit the brief. And as Wendy said, they were chopping into giant pieces of fabric, which they're not scraps. anyone who's watching at home who's a quilter, which I'm not, they'll be screaming at what they're listening to now and going, they're not scraps. They, I wouldn't use those as scraps. And they were literally going like this. And some of them were like piles. And I'm thinking, the bag's only this big. You don't need all of that fabric. I just found it really odd. And I just found when they were critiquing it as well, it was all a bit, it was just a bit, it was all about the color. I felt that this time round, like Esme, it was more of a design challenge than it was a pattern challenge. They weren't necessarily equally critiquing, I know it's the edit, but they weren't equally critiquing the makeup of the bag, as in terms of the color choice that the people had used. So if you hadn't used a color choice that they maybe agreed with, then you were sort of like scored down for that. You might have actually have executed it beautifully, but they weren't really going in there and like having a real look. But I thought the person that won with the love hearts, I thought in actual fact, yeah, that was a, that it was a really nice it was a really nice bag. But yeah, I was not a fan of that as a challenge. I didn't see, I didn't see really I didn't see what the point of it was. I could see the technique, but I couldn't see the actual point.
Talking about colour, right at the beginning, Pasha, I do believe it was Pasha, said, we better not have too much brown in because Esme doesn't like brown. And I just thought, so why is there brown there? She doesn't like it. So,
but also, I thought it was a bit mean that she obviously didn't like pink either. And I can't remember which one it was who made it in pink. And I thought, that's personal choice, isn't it? You can't say, that's Lauren, no good because it's pink.
Yeah. Lauren, who had
a pink week, she actually.
She went pink. So Lauren went pink, and Patrick actually rescued it and said, well, the colour's absolutely fine, it's fine. Yes. But the other thing that, anybody sewn on a magnetic clasp, because the organza was so flimsy as well, that magnetic clasp would have been extremely heavy to have been held onto that fabric. I don't know what they had to sew into because there was nothing really, there was no body there. So I think the whole thing set them up a little bit for a challenge, set them up for failure. And putting a zip in when, again, all those raw edges and quite flimsy fabric, they didn't execute that well.
It was almost as if they felt that they've got to make it harder by putting that hand sewn magnetic clasp and a zip in, because if you've got a flat and a magnetic clasp, you actually don't need the zip. That's a little bit sort of OTT. And as you say, I mean, I don't know I can't remember which one it was, but one of them they couldn't open the zip because it had got caught in the raw edges.
Yeah, I think that was
they had raw edges.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't lined it. So there was nothing to, cover those raw edges. So
I know.
Given time, I suppose they could have done bias binding on the edges on the inside or something, but then it's always down to time, isn't it?
Of course, they actually got 3 hours for doing that. And I suggest that probably, although we don't know because of the edit, I bet there was a huge amount of time on prepping the fabrics to create the confetti and then placing the fabrics rather than...
It did definitely, because they were saying, like you've got an hour left and they were only just getting to the quilting point. So it had obviously taken at least half the time just to cut up the pieces and sandwich them.
Yeah,
it was interesting in the edit though, because the main focus was that there were going to be Hawkeyes, apparently, as May said, about the actual quilting itself. And in actual fact, when I was watching it, I was thinking there's only maybe 1 or 2 people that you've really referenced the actual quilting. One was, the quilting's a bit wonky, and then the other was like, it's been beautifully quilted. And I was looking at it, I was thinking, I can see quite irregular squares there. It's not a tight I just think, for me as a couturier, the inside should be as beautiful inside as it is outside, and that's my training. You just it should be, that should be your mantra. And a lining sorts a multitude of sins out. A lining essentially is there to hide all the raw edges, and it stops the friction on the seams. So
I would have preferred leave the zip out and put bias binding on the seams on the inside, and that would have resolved. So there still would have been a technique there, but you would have eliminated that zip because the zip was there for the sake of it being there. Or French seams potentially, but that was going to be really difficult because the way they sewed the flap onto the edge of the bag, that was always going to be different. But again, they could have used, to say, eliminate that zip, bias binding those seams and eating them off. Yeah. So we'll move swiftly from there and we'll go on to the transformation challenge. And this is quote, this is not me, a pile of clothes, and it had to be colour cohesive, and they could choose 5 garments of the same colour, and they had to come up with an outfit. The first thing that I noticed was the rugby scrum into the pile of clothes, and poor Don, bless him, was last there. It was, so I'm going to go straight into Alistair this time. And we know it's not our favourite thing, the transformation challenge, but if we can just look at the garments that were actually produced and what you thought about who actually won, that would be my first thing. I didn't agree with the winner, by the way.
No, I'm actually in agreement with you. And also, we just need to say that Marcus, who's actually on this season of the Great British Sewing Bee, actually left us a little comment on our last video to say that he was taking that yellow skirt home to actually hem. So, Marcus, I hope you've got your hem sorted out. But one thing I do have to say is that the edit is very, at the moment, the edit, especially in this episode, again, Marcus was maybe having, it's edited that Marcus was having a bit of a bad week, but we've seen this in previous edits before. And when we mentioned the word edit, that's just, there could have been so much more going on, but they've just decided to take those bits of things. So it could be the actual fact, you know, they're showing Marcus not necessarily doing so well now, but then suddenly he's going to rise like a phoenix, as Conchita Wurst said. So I'll be waiting on that. So I think sometimes the editing can be actually quite unfair sometimes. I actually thought that Luke was absolutely robbed on this challenge. And I thought what he actually produced aesthetically was very clever. And some of the detail, it was very Martin Margiela. So I just thought some of the details and very Dries van Noten. So I actually thought it was very, very clever, but in actual fact, the one that actually, I thought technique wise and the way it was to come runner up, I actually thought, so look, if you are watching, I thought you were robbed on that one. And that's all I'm really going to say on well actually it's not the only thing I'm going to say, but no. But I mean put Don, I mean he's just literally there wasn't enough of it was a simply he cut up the back of the top and put, you know, a crisscross on the back, and some of them was there just seemed the program didn't seem to flow as much. It seemed to be more of the same all the time, and then Marcus just went, you know, for a color explosion, and it was just like he was just going to be doomed from the beginning because it was like there was no coherence in the color options. But again, it's all about the color. It's not necessarily about what he actually produced. It was a whole, you know, it was a whole piece. But yeah, I didn't agree with it. And some of them were like Luke's was very sort of like technical and how he had approached his, but some of the other ones were, in my opinion, were just too simple. And the fact that they had to use one color, it's like when, I'm sorry, but if you've got a pile of jumble sale clothes and you've got to sort out through color, you're going to be there for half an hour just sorting out colors.
Why didn't they put all the yellow in one pile, the pink in one pile, the black in one pile? Do you know what I mean? Rather than having this one pile, that would have made life a bit easier because then they could have gone to it. Wendy, what were your thoughts about this transformation challenge?
Well, as we all say, I mean, it's their least favourite, to put it nicely, because I think what they do is they cut up perfectly good things and make them into things that you would never ever wear anywhere. Obviously, finishing is never a detail. I did actually like Pasha's corset and skirt. I thought that was actually reasonably wearable. I do agree that it wasn't necessarily particularly technically brilliant. I also liked Marcus's colourful jacket, and I did kind of see that the colours, they kind of went together. He sort of picked, he did pick autumn colours sort of thing, didn't he? But that wasn't the brief, so fair dues, I get that. I like the leopard print one that Georgie did. I quite like that. I thought that was quite a clever way of turning a skirt into something. I mean, it wasn't a big transformation, but honestly, I really can't ever fault any of them because I could not do it. If you gave me 90 minutes, it's as Alistair's just said, it would take me a good half an hour to choose my garment and my fabric before I could even begin. So the fact that they do it and they produce anything is remarkable.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. Before we move on, so that we've already agreed that Marcus came last, not because of what he'd sewn or created, it was because of the colour. The winner was Pasha, who did that very, it was, I agree with you, like a waistcoat type corset. There was a gothic link to it. And look, I thought, actually I was watching it while I was having my hair done, and the two hairdressers picked looks as their winners. They're not sewers, but as a look and a complete transformation and having that wow factor, they picked that one, which was quite interesting.
The only thing I'd say though with Luke's, that was the one that he had the bustier bit underneath was already a bustier underneath, wasn't it? He didn't create that. He just added to it. And then the puffer skirt had the arm still hanging off it.
Yeah.
I think
that's what put me off that one.
Well, I think looks from a fashion point of view. So, for instance, with hair and makeup and a model and what have you, I actually could see that, and this is quite high praise, but I could see that in editorial in something like Dazed and Confused. I could see that being shot and actually put into a fashion publication. If it all being styled correctly. So I actually thought, in actual fact, thank you, Luke, because in actual fact, I don't like that middle challenge. But in actual fact, I actually thought that was I thought that was really well done. And I liked sometimes also those types of colors, like whites, creams, beiges, flesh tones, they're the most trickiest colors to actually get right to work. Everyone thinks that, oh, well, trying to get blacks to work. So, for instance, within the fashion industry, there are the hardest color to actually match when you go out. Everyone thinks black is black. It's not. There's white blacks, blue blacks, red blacks, yellow blacks. There's all sorts of different types. And what it genuinely means is the base fabric that's used before it's actually dyed. Sometimes it can be a white base. Sometimes it can be a yellow base, a red or a blue or what have you. And that actually affects the tone of the actual black. What they do with the dyes is they chuck all of the dyes that are left. They basically chuck it into a drum and try and make the darkest color they can, and it ends up really dark. So black is actually the hardest color to match, especially creams and tonals and that kind of thing. They're actually quite difficult to actually get right. So well done.
So we'll go on to the last, which is normally the fitting challenge. I had a big issue with this one. They basically had to use a wedding dress and then create a completely different garment. I have to say that Luke's wife, how brave, because he used her wedding dress for this particular project. So good on her. She really supports Luke's wife. It was Luke's wife's wedding dress that was used in the transformation.
Marcus, darling.
Oh, was it Marcus? I've written down Luke.
Yeah.
Oh, I do apologise, Marcus. Well, I think his wife is
Luke's about to get married to his boyfriend.
Oh, right. Sorry. Got the wrong names. Well, that wife is so supportive of the husband. My first thing with this was it was a wedding dress. This could have been a transformation challenge. That was my first sort of query on it. But I'm not going to talk about the dressmaking side of things. Wendy, I'm going to go straight to you to talk about this particular challenge.
Yes, well, I felt the same, that this is actually another transformation challenge, really. That's what it was. Now, normally with this challenge, the fitting challenge, they have a chance to try it at home. But this time they didn't have a chance to try it at home. What they could do is they could deconstruct the wedding dress and then dye it. So they didn't actually have a chance of putting it together to see whether they could create something, which I think that made it very tough, really tough for them. They were, I mean, it was amazing when you saw these dresses and of course Marcus's shorts and top, that they had turned a wedding dress into something that was so utterly different. But again, you know, 4.5 hours to do all of that. I did agree with the first favourite one, Alex's baby doll sort of dress, the painted dress with the little shorts and crop top underneath. I thought that was absolutely stunning. I really did. She was clever that she used already rolled hem on it, so she didn't actually have to hem it. That was well cut. But of course, they weren't thinking of grain line or anything. No. So again, you know, the seams will twist. They won't necessarily hang properly. It's not doing dressmaking any favours by saying that you can just do that. You can just cut something up willy-nilly and lay the pattern pieces on it any old way as long as they fit. You know, it's not right. You're not using the grain line, which is really important. It has to be, grain line has to be sort of in line with the selvage, the side edges. Otherwise, seams will twist or turn, or they will stretch out of shape. And there's already things that, you know, it's very frustrating to watch when they do that, and they disregard these very important things.
We talked about that last week, actually, about one of the challenges where they had to use a smaller amount of fabric, and to get it in, they would have had to change the grain line. And we talked at length about what grain line was, you know, with your long grain and selvage to selvage. And the one thing that always strikes at me, and I know I do a lot with Vliseline products, which are interlinings and interfacings, is once again, if you're going to use a fabric and you're going to use it on the bias when it should be on the straight grain, the very least you would have to do is to support that with some interlining, because when you come to construct and sew, your seams can't possibly stay aligned with each other. What did you think of Pasha's, which was the one that was dyed? It was like the little black dress, very short, and it had the lovely bow on. What did you think of that one, Wendy?
Well, I thought actually it was lovely and elegant, but it was terribly simple. I mean, it really, there was not a lot to it at all, and she shouldn't have had any issues with getting that finished. She really shouldn't. So I'm not really sure why she did. I did notice, now I think it was Luke, and he was talking about interfacing. He was putting a bit of interfacing on those big sleeves, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah.
But I did notice that he was just ironing it very quickly. No press cloth to protect the fabric or the interfacing. Not putting the iron on there for long enough, so that would just bubble up and come off. So that's a little tip, isn't it? Always when you're going to attach fusible interfacing, you've got to do it properly. Otherwise, it will bubble up in wash and wear, and nothing you can do about that.
And they do, you know, because they've got the 4 hours, they could still do that, because they know they're going to apply interlining to a particular part. Do that first. It needs to be left between 20 and 30 minutes to adhere properly. They could be doing something else and then going back, and so it would work. So sometimes, yes, they have huge time constraints, but interlining one with it. But you need to plan. I've never seen time have a plan.
No, I mean, it's what I did notice actually one of them did. He had handwritten notes. But it's one of the things that I do when I make a pattern, even though I've been sewing my own patterns, you know, for too many years to mention, really. I will read the instructions through. And also when I cut out and I pin out darts and I interface all the pieces that need interfacing. And then I go on with making it. So like you say, I've done the interfacing. It's finished and done. It can cool down, it can set properly, and then when I'm ready to use it, it's all done, ready. So yeah, that's just a thought I said. I thought, oh my goodness, the interfacing, that's not going to be good. You need a press cloth on there. Oh, and another thing about the ruching, the two that did the ruching, Don did his, didn't he? And so
Yes.
did the girl with the pink, Lauren. A really quick way of gathering, not necessarily ruching, but gathering, is if you zigzag stitch over a piece of string, which is anchored at one end, you can then just pull up the fabric. So you pull the string so the fabric gathers up, then stitch the gathers in place and take out the string. So it's quick.
Yeah, because last week you, Alistair, got high praise indeed from the very many comments that were had left, which was with regards to your gathering to set in a seam, and that was the tip to divide it into 4. And whilst we're on this subject now, Debbie Hill left a fabulous comment on the YouTube video thanking you for that tip, amongst many other comments. Listen to Alistair before you put your sleeves in. So Debbie Hill, if you're listening to this tonight or today or whenever you're watching it, please send a private message and we will send out your prize from last week. Before we go on to discuss this next transformation, we have got the most amazing giveaway this week, and it's a Prim sewing box and your how-to cruise pattern. Do you want to show everybody?
Yeah, so you're going to get the how-to cruise pattern. So that is what you're going to create. Now, I show you how to take an old t-shirt and you use the old t-shirt that actually fits you. So it will fit you every single time, and you can do this for your friends. I tell you how to simply take, draw some simple lines, nothing overly complicated. Give it a go. That's all I'm saying. Just give it a go. And once you've got this pattern, it doesn't matter what fabric you've got, you can make it time and time again, but it goes really simply together as well. So you've got the pattern, and then you also have this Prim sewing box. So it's got some little 40s horses on there, and so you can keep all your notions and stuff like that. So that is our giveaway for this week.
So all you need to do to be in for a chance for the giveaway is to leave a comment on the YouTube channel and like and subscribe, and you're not going to miss anything else. So thanks very much, Alistair, once again. Alistair, this last challenge, this dress, and I'm going to keep saying it's the pattern challenge, it's the fitting challenge. What were your thoughts about this week?
So my thoughts are sorry, because it wasn't my favorite episode. I thought this is simply the transformation challenge, but they're just given extra time. That is simply what it was. I thought what they should have done was a stipulation for reuse should have been go to a charity shop or go somewhere, get some vintage fabric or whatever it is that you want to do. So get or bed linen, do what have you. The only thing I would say on that is that one of the contestants, like Susie, I know she has a particular design style in her head, but I would like to see something a little bit different from her, because when you're creating garments which are so voluminous, there's very little that you actually have to concentrate in terms of fit. Just because you can either add too much volume in it, or you can reduce it and there's not enough. Which we saw very, very early on with one of the contestants that went out when she was using that African print and she didn't put enough in the lantern part at the bottom of the skirt because she was trying to pattern match. She was just getting her head into the pattern matching. With some of the contestants, I just felt that there wasn't that much execution in terms of, oh, this is fitting the model, this is hanging really well, because they were oversized garments. So I thought, yes, they were very pretty, but in terms of being able to critique them for like the fit is really great. Well, it's A-line from not the bust, it's A-line from almost the shoulder. I mean, that is just like literally a giant triangle. There isn't much to fit at all. So I felt that was a bit sort of like strange, but also taking an old wedding dress and bringing it sort of like back to life or something. I just didn't really see what the point of taking a wedding dress and cutting it up and making something else out of it. I don't see what, because wedding dresses are something that either you would want to keep, or, you know, they're something that you would perhaps sell on. They're not something that you would just literally go, all right, I'm bored of that, I'm going to cut it up. Also, the pitfalls of taking something like that, a lot of wedding dresses are bias cut. Now, the biggest pitfall you can do with bias cut is the worst cut that you can ever even attempt to alter. Once you've set in a bias seam, when you tinker with that or open it up, you will get bobbling, you will get all sorts of different things, unless you're doing it fresh straight away. If you've got a wedding dress that someone's had on and what have you, when you start unpicking all of that, it starts to get all sort of like lumpy and bumpy. I thought that, for instance, there's a few like tips. Like Luke did the extravagant shoulders on his. I think if he had actually put some dress net in there, that would actually have helped actually keep those shoulders up, because they were a little bit floppy. And I think he wanted them more sort of like sharp and angular, because he was going on about his mum in the 80s. And I'm a massive fan of a designer called Thierry Mugler, who essentially went to town on those angular big shoulders. So that was my sort of initial thoughts on those. Lauren's, I thought it was such a shame because you could see the lining popping out, and it just the fact that it was a simple way of doing that is doing an understitch. So when you're having a facing or a lining, what you do is you run a line of top stitching, so you catch the seam allowance, but you're top stitching the lining, not the actual front of the garment, but you're actually top stitching along that. That keeps everything just very, very neat down. And when you're pressing, that allows it to be about 2 millimeters, so it's hidden. So that would have given a really neat finish. So there's just little tips like that. I actually thought Marcus's was a fantastic concept. And I actually thought, and once you got up close, yes, there were lots of things like the finish and stuff wasn't quite there. But I actually thought taking a wedding dress and actually making a gent's outfit out of it, I actually thought was actually really quite refreshing. Actually, I thought, well, in actual fact, it was, and it's very much in vogue at the moment with broadly on glaze being in all of the stores. Alicia, I thought the actual finished garment was a lot better than, you know, the pictures that they show about what they're about to make, kind of thing.
But it still looked like a wedding dress, though. Did you not think?
I agree.
Yeah.
With that.
Looked like, to me, it looked like a wedding dress.
And I actually hate to say, I also agree with Patrick's comment that if she hadn't got that sort of netting over the top, it possibly would have looked better, because you could have seen all of the bunked up bits which you couldn't see.
Yeah.
I do agree with you, Alistair, about the fitting of those. I wasn't even thinking, because by then I'd stopped thinking of it as a fitting challenge. But you're absolutely right. The winner wasn't fitted at all. So for a fitting challenge, that's a little odd, isn't it?
So, you know, you're talking about wedding dresses. Up here is what was my wedding dress. My nana made this as a christening gown for my children. And she had enough fabric to do a smaller garment, but I'm not so sure if she would have been able to, because she could then get the grain and everything right, because it was a smaller garment. I mean, obviously my kids are very, very much older now. They're in their late 30s. But had they been given something that was achievable, as in a smaller, for a child or something, or like a christening gown, then they could have maybe used better techniques. And you're talking about Marcus's, it was a brilliant idea, but what Wendy said earlier on, you're never going to get the proper finish, because the amount of fabric they required to come out of one dress, cut on the bias, it just, I think it was a particularly hard brief to give them, personally.
I think there was no real way. It's like the brief wasn't a brief that you could really interpret. So if they had said you need to make an outfit that would be suitable for being a guest at a wedding, rather than taking a bridal dress and then having to turn that into something else, but then this stipulation should have been, you either have to reuse garments or repurpose existing fabric and leave it at that. So then that brief would have opened up. But to have to take an actual wedding dress and then turn it into something which is supposed to be completely unrecognized. Also, the other thing as well that I was thinking about was the fact that they were dyeing it, they were doing this, they were doing that. Is that really that great for the environment? In terms of, okay, so I'm taking a wedding dress and I'm literally going to dye it and dye it and dye it, and I'm doing it over process and do all these other different things. It wasn't my, it didn't really, it didn't really fall or flow for me this week at all. I just thought, I don't know whether or not the production company maybe is trying too hard. We're trying to make it different with different ideas, but I'm just not sure under this, recycle, reuse sort of like week. I felt a bit flat after it, really. I just didn't, as I said, it wasn't my favorite episode.
This is the 10th year, and to be fair, from the first week when they were going back to previous challenges, as much as we were a little bit concerned about that concept, I think that might have been, it would be nice to see a little bit of the previous ones. I'm very interested, Wendy, in the book that you wrote for that 4th season, and it was it included the patterns in the projects. How did that come about? Did they give you the brief, or did you come up with the ideas?
No, I got a phone call to say, would you like to write this book? So I was quite privileged, really. And then, that after very many meetings, what they wanted is the garments from the program, so they supplied those because obviously they'd already got them. And then we also I had to come up with another, I think it was another 15 garments to go alongside it. So it was a real challenge. I've written 23 books, but this one was the hardest because I was given the job in December, and I had to get it all to them finished by the 20th of January.
Oh my goodness gracious! Sorry, I've heard of tight deadlines for books, but
I know it was absolutely ridiculous. It really was. I had a friend of mine, Claire, who actually teaches at the shows, and she said to me, "Can I help you in any way? Let me know." And I said, "Yes." So bless her, she really did. She really helped me. So we did the the sort of patterns that we've created, and thankfully, Alistair, you're going to say I'm cheat, but basically we had to design the pattern. So we would say, what we want it to look like, the length of the sleeve, the width, and all that sort of thing. But a pattern cutter then converted that into a pattern, or pattern drafter, and then somebody else graded the pattern. So I didn't have to do that.
Right.
So while that was being done, I was writing all the techniques and doing all of the sampling for all of the techniques that were in the book as well. So those I had to write and develop myself. And then once the pattern was created, we then had to make those up. So again, Claire helped me. Between us, we made them up.
And the criticism, sorry, Alistair, the criticism of the most current books, I've seen again on Facebook. There's a couple of Facebook sites that are linked, maybe not linked as in to the program, but have been created because of the program. And a lot of people are having problems with the latest books because the patterns aren't as they should be. I feel as if somebody hasn't actually pattern tested them. Now, when you have done your book, and I think this is what people will find really interesting. We've all written books for different things, but when you're writing something like a dressmaking book, you would have either sewn that yourself, and you go through the techniques and you make your adjustments. It's apparent even on the patterns that they give them. I sometimes wonder, has actually somebody sat and read and not followed the instructions because they know how to do it, but followed those instructions? You, in that time's constraint, will have had to do all of that pattern testing.
Yes, exactly. Well, I didn't actually get to test the finished patterns other than make the sample ones that I made. I think the best one was they wanted me to, they're doing an Indian week next week, aren't they? They wanted me to create a dress out of a sari. And as I'd been to India doing an Indian tour, I had some sari length. So I made a sample piece and I just lined it with calico because this was a sample. And I made this sample dress from this beautiful sari that I had. And then they sent me the fabric they wanted me to use, which wasn't particularly interesting, but, you know, use it I did. Went up for one of the meetings with the finished garments ready for them to take off to photography. And they didn't like the sari dress. And they, oh, that's not what we expected. I said, well, this is the one I made from my own fabric. So, and that's the one they used in the book.
Really?
Except, rudely, they pinned it in at the back because the girl was obviously a lot thinner than me.
Now, you're talking about Indian week is next week.
Yes.
Tell us about the tour that you're going to be doing next year.
Yeah, so I'm doing another textile tour of India. It's actually of Rajasthan, and I'm doing it next October. And it's through a company, so I'm hosting it. So I come along, and I think it's 10 days. It's 17th of October to 28th of October next year, 2025. And I'm doing it with Ahilya Holidays. I'll spell that for you later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be really good fun. I loved it last time. I did it in, I think it was 2015. So it's, you know, it's going to be 10 years since I've done that one. It's so much fun. And the fabrics you see, and the block printing, and the screen printing, and the actually learning how to create the blocks, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I'm sure it will be again. And the nice thing is you can go on your own, because you won't be on your own, you'll be in a tour, and everything's laid on.
Right. And what we'll do is we'll put the link up.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah,
to have a look for that. Leading on, I know that you've got a really busy schedule with the shows, but could you tell us a little bit about where you're teaching? Because you teach yourself, and you teach with Jenny Raymond as well. So yes, tell us where you are so people know where they can come.
So yes, I teach in a place called Maiden Making in Hassock near Brighton. Do that a couple of times a year. Sometimes I teach in Petersfield, because that's sort of relatively local for me. And then I run creative sewing weekends 4 times a year with Jenny Raymond. So I do some dressmaking, and she does quilting, her style of quilting, as
fiddling,
fiddling. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, they're very popular, and they're a full weekend. Just a lot of fun, a lot of eating and drinking, far too much eating and drinking. But so it's just a lot of fun.
So if people want to join it, we'll put Wendy's link on there as well.
Yes, yeah, I've got a website which one day I'll get around to updating. But yes,
we were talking about it. We're not very good at promoting ourselves, are we?
Really not.
So yes, but I will put all the links on there, so you could contact Wendy through our Facebook page if you want to know where she is and how you can take a class or a session with her. That's great. So all it leaves me to say is, did you agree? And I'll go to Alistair first. Did you agree with this week's garment of the week? And did you agree with who went home?
I didn't necessarily agree with garment of the week because it is a fitting challenge, and because it is so voluminous. I just thought it was very pretty, don't get me wrong, and it was lovely. But when it's specifically a fitting challenge, there were other people who did other things where they didn't have any place to hide. And when you do something that has so much volume in, you can hide in so many places. So I didn't necessarily agree with that. However, sadly, I did have to agree that Don's time was it was now. I didn't think he transformed his wedding dress into anything. It was pretty much, it was the same, it was kind of like the same dress. So yeah, I didn't.
What about you, Wendy? Did you agree with the decisions?
See, now Alistair's made me think again, because I did agree with the garment of the week, because I thought it was fantastic. But as I said, I wasn't thinking of it as the fitting challenge. I was just thinking, my God, that's really beautiful and dramatic. And I mean, I couldn't wear it. It's not my kind of thing. But I really did like it from a dress point of view, ignoring the fact it actually was the fitting challenge. And yes, I'm afraid I did agree with Don going, his bag was a bit of a mishmash. He got the zip in the wrong way, etc. His transformation was limited. And then the wedding challenge, as you say, I mean, I think he made a good job. And I'm sure he said he makes things for his grandchildren, and he's sewn for years, and he's sewn prom dresses. He just needs a reasonable amount of time to do it, as opposed to this challenge which cuts it back. Oh, and just going back when you said, do they test the patterns? Yes, they do. The patterns for the pattern challenge are tested and made up in advance. So that's how they know how long to give them.
Right, that's interesting.
It's a bit less than it's taken them.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think.
I just need to add something, just in case Alex is watching and is sort of seething me saying about the fitting challenge. She did make a top underneath, which was fitted. We didn't get to see that, and she did make those the knickers that were underneath it, and she used the lace trims. So that part of it, yes, from what I could see, those were perfectly fitting. It was just the outer garment that they seem to be, but that again, that's all in the edit. So
well, exactly. And this is the thing, and this is what we want to, the Sewing Bee Natter is just, if we've got any tips or techniques to give people, then it's great. It's great to hear people's advice. Sorry, go on, Wendy.
So I just wanted to add one. I'm trying to think which one it was. I think it was Georgie who did the blue. She dyed her dress blue, and it was beaded. And she was having problems sewing the seams because of the beading being in the way. And then she was snipping them off. Now, if you snip them off, you've got the risk of actually all the rest coming off. So really, you should crush them, which is very time consuming. She wouldn't have the time to do that in that challenge. But you need to crush the beads, not snip them. If you snip them off, there might be on a whole trail of them, and you'll lose the lot later.
So if you literally got something that, like, and I was saying a hammer, but you know what I mean? You could
literally
hard rolling pin, smash them down, put a piece of cloth on the top, smash them, and then
you have to smash them away from the seams. And
if you used a walking foot, then it's going to be a little bit more forgiving if you hit a bead, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's the needle that's.
Of course, it's the needle. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of going over the hills.
Yeah, go over the bumps, but
yeah, that's great. Well, again, thank you so much. Next week's Indian week, goodness knows what we'll get. The challenges are then. Wendy, can I just say a massive thank you to you for joining us tonight or today, whatever it is.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and imparting your advice. Please, everybody, check out Wendy. Don't forget, on the House of Alistair page, there is 15% off everything, even if it's in the sale, and you use the code Alistair.
So it's B, so capital B, capital E, capital E, 15, and that 15. Will get you 15% off, even the Visaline products as well. So it's across the entire website. And as you said, even the sale products, you get another 15% off those.
So leave your comments, please, and hopefully everybody will join us next week. Can I just say a massive thank you again? See you later. Bye.
See you.